Let's start with the book of Matthew this morning, the 8th chapter, and we will start with the 23rd verse. It's a story that I think most of you are familiar with. And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A windstorm arose on the sea, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waters. But he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?" May God bring a blessing to this reading, our hearing, and our understanding, the holy word of God. Thanks be to God. You know, I don't know about you, but I seem to get a better start to my day when I turn on the morning news and read the headlines before I head out to work. My habit for a long time is to watch a couple of morning shows, one that talks about political happenings and one that focuses in on the financial world. I think maybe I need to switch to Sesame Street and sing along with Big Bird and the crew. Maybe I ought to cut back on my venti coffee from Starbucks as well. In many ways, we pretty much set ourselves up for how our day's going to go. If we approach it with high expectations and a positive attitude, more than likely we'll have a good day. But if we drag ourselves out of bed and dread another day of bad news and unfulfilling work, well, you more than likely get just what you expect. For the most part, I'm a glass half full kind of person, but Barb can testify that when I become a glass half empty kind of guy, I'm no fun to be around. I've come to believe that it takes far more energy to get through the day as a glass half empty person than it does for one that sees the world for the possibilities in it. Several years ago, Barb's and my good friend and songwriter Don Schlitz, he wrote a song about a little boy who saw himself as a great baseball hitter. Kenny Rogers recorded the song and received some airplay. Certainly not as successful as the first time Don and Kenny got together on a little song called The Gambler, but a fun song nonetheless. If you aren't familiar with The Greatest, I encourage you to go to YouTube and look it up. But for this morning, just listen to the lyrics. Little boy in a baseball hat stands in the field with his ball and bat, says, "I'm the greatest player of them all." Puts his bat on his shoulder and he tosses up his ball. And the ball goes up and the ball comes down. Swings his bat all the way around. The world's so still you can hear the sound. The baseball falls to the ground. Now the little boy doesn't say a word. Picks up his ball, he is undeterred. Says, "I'm the greatest there's ever been." And he grits his teeth and he tries again. And the ball goes up and the ball comes down. Swings his bat all the way around. The world's so still you can hear the sound. The baseball falls to the ground. He makes no excuses. He shows no fears. He just closes his eyes and listens to the cheers. Little boy in a baseball hat picks up his ball, stares at his bat, says, "I'm the greatest, the game is on the line," and he gives his all one last time. And the ball goes up like the moon so bright, swings his bat with all his might. And the world so still as still can be, and the baseball falls, and that's strike three. Now it's supper time and his mama calls. Little boy starts home with his bat and ball. Says, "I'm the greatest, that is a fact. But even I didn't know I could pitch like that." He says, "I'm the greatest that is understood. But even I didn't know I could pitch that good." Don has written a lot of great songs over the years, but this one is one of those that is near the top of his favorites. Now, I need to tell you, Don is a half-empty glass kind of guy. So for those of us who know him, this is a song that's somewhat unexpected. It's a song about reframing your reality. Obviously, the little boy, at least at this point in his life, is not the greatest hitter ever. But by the end of the song, he has now shifted his focus upon being the greatest pitcher. Same boy. Same simple throwing up the ball, but a new reality, at least in his mind. You gotta love it. At some point in our lives, many of us have to decide whether we will be a realist with a positive outlook or a realist with a negative perspective. If you believe that even with as bad as it gets, that there's a silver lining, you're gonna find it. If you believe that it is really bad and will probably get worse, it probably will. You see, when we set our hearts and minds on what we expect to see in the world, we will somehow dismiss all those things that don't fit our reality and magnify those things that do. So when you look at Jesus and his disciples, you find this classic example of reframing reality. Even when he is most exhausted, Jesus could somehow make the best of his situation. This morning's scripture reminds us that Jesus was always answering the demands of the people around him. In the Matthew account of Jesus calming the water, we find that he is traveling in the boat to get away from that growing crowd on one side of the lake. He's been teaching and preaching and healing. He's worn out. But even in his exhausted state, he maintains his balance and is ready to once again go to work when he hits the other shore. He may have had his moments when he was a little testy, calming the storm, turning over the money changers' tables, but for the most part, he was on his game and ready to respond. Those around him didn't have that kind of calm. They had a hard time seeing beyond all of those things that could go wrong. Many of them operated right on the edge of panic because they saw only the bad at every turn. When Jesus was ministering in the crowd, they worried about who might get to him. When he chose to feed the masses, they were convinced that it would be a total disaster. After traveling with him for 3 years of their lives, they still had troubles finding the grace in the moment, as they could only see the impending problems on the horizon. For nearly 35 years, I was blessed to meet on an annual basis with some of the most gifted and talented ministers our denomination has. These are people serving some of our historic large churches, and many of them are doing quite well, thank you. When you have a chance to sit with one of these people, you find that they are horizon kind of people. They know that there are problems and pitfalls in their appointed ministries, but each also sees the potential for greatness in their church. Even with the people who have been through really difficult times in their ministries, they still see God working great things in the places they serve. These are glass half full people. Now, you may be thinking that this is the kind of gathering where everyone is simply trying to put the best spin on their current placement. And that surely could be true. But I really think that the people in the room that I met were people who could see beyond the problems to the possibilities at hand. And this ability to deal with reality but also see the possibilities kept them from getting bogged down in the mire of bad news and able to stay focused on the good. This is not a rosy-colored glass approach that denies the downside, but a realist approach that chooses to see the opportunity at hand and not the opportunity lost. Too many churches today are in the survival mode, and this mode sees the church dying and all out of energy, and all of the work the church that comes out fears that could happen. In this kind of perceived reality, everything new is seen as possible cause for the death of the church. You don't take any risks because any failure could push the church over the brink. This is a tough place to do productive and faithful work. When the driving force is to protect what you have rather than to take the risk for what you can become, the life drains out of the church. A large percentage of churches find themselves in this place, and they are fulfilling their greatest fear, the death of their church. They are unable to reframe their reality and see that change is the only way to move forward, and maintaining is a recipe for further loss. One of the great tragedies in life is when we think in doing the same thing over and over again, somehow the results will be different. Churches get stuck in this mode all the time, and they pay a price for it. So do families. So do individuals. Somehow we have to find the courage and the energy to break the cycle, or we will simply continue to spin further and further down the hole. The disciples, well, they could only see the trouble around them and ahead of them. Jesus ministered in the present and kept looking forward to what God was planning for him. Tragically, it took his death and resurrection before those around him were really willing to see his truth and begin to take the risks necessary for the church to thrive. When we reframe our reality, then all of life takes on a different look. It's like the blinders being removed and the whole landscape coming into view. And reframing, we risk seeing the world for what it can be and become open to finding a new role in it. I've always found it amazing that God can see all of this before we do. And when the church is ready and willing to reframe its reality, most of the time God has already placed the necessary gifts among us to make it work. I believe that this has happened and is currently happening here at Middletown. As we begin to risk seeing the glass half full, then we will also begin to see how God will keep filling it again and again as long as we need it. Let me close with one more baseball reference this morning. A man was driving by a Little League baseball park on a beautiful afternoon. He had some time to burn between appointments, so he parked and walked to the outside of the center field fence, where he watched for a little while. The team on the field was getting beat badly. The fielders were constantly running to the fence to retrieve the ball, throwing it back into the infield. After this had gone on for some time and the team at bat was still getting run after run, the man asked the boy playing center field, "What's the score?" The boy responded, 18-0, to which the man responded, "I bet you're discouraged." The little boy replied immediately, "Why should I be discouraged? We haven't even gotten up to bat." Reframing reality. No reason to get discouraged until you get your time at bat. The time to bat is now, Middletown. How will we respond?